In November of 2023, 33-year-old mother of three Hillary Ellington Brown went into cardiac arrest while being operated on by her 41-year-old husband, Dr. Benjamin Brown, at his practice in Gulf Breeze, Florida. Several months later, Benjamin was charged with murdering his wife. Hillary planned to get an ear adjustment, lip injections, abdominal scar revision, and liposuction in her arms. She prepared her own IV bags with a local anesthetic called lidocaine, even though she had no formal training, and she took a handful of pills including Valium and Tramadol. During the procedures, Hillary became restless and complained about blurred vision, which are symptoms of lidocaine toxicity. As her condition worsened, she became unresponsive and had a seizure. A medical assistant asked if they should dial 911, but Benjamin told them not to. He continued telling his employees not to call 911 for the next 10 to 20 minutes as they searched frantically for emergency equipment. By the time CPR began, it was too late to save Hillary. She was eventually rushed to the hospital where she was placed on a life support and died a week later. In May of 2024, the Florida Department of Health issued an emergency restriction on Benjamin's medical license. According to the agency's findings, Benjamin fell far short of professional standards in many ways, but his biggest violation was in his failure to seek help the moment it became obvious that Hillary was having a medical emergency. The following month, he was charged with second-degree murder. According to those closest to Hillary, there were signs that her marriage to Benjamin was strained. Her father, Marty Ellington, told the Pensacola News Journal that he thinks his daughter might have stayed with her husband because the lifestyle was favorable. He also said that Hillary probably didn't want to put her children through another divorce after her first marriage had failed. Shortly after Benjamin's arrest, his family issued a statement to the media denying that he committed any wrongdoing and announcing his plans to fight the allegations in court. If convicted as charged, he could face life in prison or life on probation. He quickly posted a $50,000 bond following his arrest and remains free pending the outcome of the case. Right now, I'm writing down the secret number between 0 and 5,000. Guess it correctly in the comments section as a reply to our pinned post on today's YouTube video, and we'll send you a free They Will Kill You t-shirt of your choice, and you'll be featured in one of our videos. Number 23. Dei Agoga. Just days after traveling from Britain to Istanbul for a Brazilian butt lift in January of 2024, 26-year-old mother of three Dei Agoga had a heart attack in a taxi while on her way to a post-op checkup appointment. Her partner, Bradley Jones, performed CPR, but efforts to revive her unfortunately failed, and she was declared dead just hours before she was due to fly back to the UK. Agoga's fatal heart attack was thought to be caused by a fat embolism, which is when fat enters the bloodstream and blocks a blood vessel. This is one of the deadly ways that a Brazilian butt lift can go wrong, as a result of fat from another part of the body being improperly injected into the patient's rear end. Agoga's boyfriend and family tried to talk her out of getting the procedure done, but they were unable to stop her from following through with it. She had traveled to Turkey for plastic surgery before, including cosmetic dental work, which ended with botched results. Her death came just months after the United Kingdom's Foreign Office issued an advisory warning citizens about receiving medical treatment in Turkey, where at least 25 Brits have died from plastic surgery since 2019. Number 22. Arian Malavi. Also known as Dr. Laguna, plastic surgeon Dr. Arian Malavi amassed more than 80,000 followers on Instagram, where he shared photos and videos of his work, supposedly without the consent of some of the patients who were featured in the posts. In one post, a woman appeared to be under anesthesia while lying face down on an operating table with her rear end fully exposed. Malavi has also been accused of botching numerous procedures. In 2018, a patient died from internal bleeding 3 days after undergoing liposuction and a breast augmentation. Her family sued and was awarded a $1 million settlement. In recent years, 36 patients have sued Malavi for malpractice, battery, mayhem, and other offenses. The plaintiffs accused the surgeon of posting their images online without consent, touching them inappropriately, making inappropriate comments about their bodies, and botching their surgeries. One woman ended up in a hospital burn unit after she said Malavi talked her into getting extra liposuction done. 10 days after the procedure, she was rushed to the emergency room with septic shock. Her organs were failing and she needed surgery to remove a large amount of dead and rotting skin from her midsection. In 2021, the California Medical Board suspended Malavi's medical license for 3 months and imposed a 10-year probation period. In 2024, Malavi agreed to pay $6 million to 36 plaintiffs who have agreed not to speak negatively about him as a condition of the settlement. According to the most recent available updates, he remains at the center of a criminal investigation, has declared bankruptcy, and is being sued by the Orange County District Attorney's Office for unfair and unlawful business practices. Number 21. Chloe Rose. In January of 2024, 22-year-old Chloe Rose and her best friend traveled from West Yorkshire, England, to Turkey for cosmetic surgery. The first sign of something going wrong came when Rose woke up from what was supposed to be a 45-minute breast lift procedure. The surgery had taken upwards of 4 hours and she was convulsing. Not long after that, her nipples turned black. The doctors who performed the operation had removed too much skin, cutting off circulation and causing tissue to die. After it became clear that Rose wasn't healing properly, they unstitched and partially restitched her, leaving her with painful open wounds. Rose did not receive any pain medication after the botched procedure, leaving her in excruciating pain that caused her to cry out from her hospital bed. Doctors threatened to kick her out of the hospital if she continued crying and told her it would be her own fault if she died because she wasn't drinking enough water. There was also a language barrier which made communication difficult in the first place. Officials from the British Embassy helped Rose obtain access to antibiotics and served as translators between the young woman and medical staff, but they were unable to help her travel back to Britain, so her family started a fundraiser in a frantic effort to get her home. They raised the money quickly and Rose was flown to the UK where she received the care she needed. Number 20. Angelica Isaacson. After having twins, 27-year-old Angelica Isaacson wanted to get a mummy makeover to help get her body back in shape for bikini competitions. In June of 2019, she flew from Stockholm, Sweden, to Turkey for low-cost plastic surgery at a celebrity-endorsed clinic she found on Instagram. During her 6-day stay in Turkey, Isaacson got a tummy tuck, a butt lift, and a breast augmentation. A few days later, one of her breasts had become swollen and bright red, and she was in severe pain. Isaacson had undergone painful procedures before, including a cesarean section, so she knew she was capable of tolerating pain, but this was worse than anything she had ever experienced. Staff members at the clinic where Isaacson got the surgery told her she was experiencing typical side effects and implied that she was overreacting, so she returned to Sweden. But the symptoms failed to subside and the situation became even more terrifying 2 weeks after the operation, when one of Isaacson's implants began to protrude from an open surgical wound. She went to the emergency room where she learned that she had contracted a bacteria-resistant MRSA infection. Isaacson was hospitalized for 5 days while doctors treated the infection, then spent 2 weeks in bed at home while waiting to have the implants removed by a plastic surgeon. During that time, she had to remain lying down as often as possible to prevent the implant from falling out while the opening in her surgical wound grew even bigger. Isaacson ultimately had both implants removed, and the horrifying experience changed her views on plastic surgery. She took to social media with her story to raise awareness of the potentially life-threatening dangers of bargain operations, in hopes that she can discourage others from undergoing risky procedures. Number 19. Ellen Gonzalez. Ellen Gonzalez of Stamford, Connecticut turned to cosmetic surgery as a way to feel better about her appearance after being bullied about her looks as a child. But it had the opposite effect, thanks to a series of botched procedures that left her with overinflated Barbie lips and a Miss Piggy snout. Her disastrous journey started with silicone lip injections in 2004. In 2016, she underwent a nose job and was unhappy with the results, so she got more surgery in an attempt to fix it. Gonzalez also asked her plastic surgeon to make her lips smaller, which left them looking lumpy and asymmetric. As a result of the botched procedure, her lips only met in the middle, causing food to fall out of her mouth when she ate. They also became infected after the surgery, leaving her with disfiguring scars. In early 2020, Gonzalez made plans to go under the knife yet again in hopes of fixing some of the damage to her face. The only surgeon she could afford to go to was the one who performed her previous procedures, leaving her nervous about how the results would turn out. Gonzalez told the press that she didn't feel confident about trusting the surgeon, but that she had no other choice. It's unclear how the operation went. Number 18. ONeal Ron Morris. In 2005, transgender actress and activist Raji Nareen Singh got lip filler injections in an effort to feminize her appearance. She received the injections from ONeal Ron Morris, who eventually became infamous for injecting patients with dangerous and deadly substances. In Nareen Singh's case, Morris used tire sealant and cement, leaving her face covered in large, disfiguring lumps. She was eventually helped by doctors Paul Nassif and Terry Dubrow of the reality series Botched, who removed the cement from her face and restored her appearance. Morris gave off her patients the impression that she had some medical training and was using safe, high-quality fillers, but this wasn't the case. One patient, Shataka Nubi, died in 2011 from the effects of having toxic substances injected into her rear end. Her death came during an investigation into Morris's black market injections, resulted in charges against the phony provider in Florida for manslaughter and practicing medicine without a license. Morris's lawyer denied allegations that she pretended to be a doctor, even though she had previously served prison time for practicing medicine without a license. She pleaded no contest to the charges in 2012 and was sentenced to 10 years in prison and 5 years of probation. Records show that Morris will be released in June of 2025. Number 17. Tomas Kosowski. 41-year-old attorney Stephen Kotze vanished from his law firm in Largo, Florida, in March of 2023 after telling his partner that he was going to the bathroom. He never returned, despite his wallet, keys and phone being left behind, along with his vehicle. After looking in the bathroom and finding blood evidence, Kotze's partner called the police. His body was never found, but based on the evidence, investigators are treating the case as a homicide. Less than a week after Kotze disappeared, police arrested 44-year-old plastic surgeon Tomas Roman Kosowski on a first-degree murder charge. At the time of his death, Kotze was representing Kosowski's former employer and co-workers in an ongoing lawsuit that the surgeon had filed 7 years earlier. Kosowski accused the defendants of ruining his career by lying to his patients and failing to bill their insurance properly, resulted in negative reviews being written about him online. Using surveillance footage and cell phone records, investigators traced the accused killer's movements to the remote Tamiami Trail, also known as US Highway 41, which extends westward from Miami into the Everglades. According to prosecutors, Kosowski threw Kotze's body into a dumpster, which was subsequently emptied into a garbage truck and taken to a landfill. By the time this theory developed, it was too late to find Kotzi's body, which was likely compacted with the garbage that it was dropped off at the landfill with. Kosowski remains held without bail at the Pinellas County Jail. His trial is scheduled for January of 2025, and prosecutors plan to seek the death penalty. Number 16. Alcala Gimenez de Rodriguez. 36-year-old Vincenzo Zerlo began getting Botox injections from 56-year-old Alcala Gimenez de Rodriguez at a clinic in Doral, Florida, in 2020 after meeting her through a friend. A few months into his treatments, he asked about getting a rhinoplasty, commonly known as a nose job. Gimenez de Rodriguez agreed to perform the surgery at a cut rate price of just $2,000, which is well below the market rate for the procedure in the United States. After the operation, the self-proclaimed practitioner sent Zerlo home with prescriptions from a doctor he had never heard of. It was the first red flag he noticed, followed by excruciating pain. Zerlo was also unhappy with how the results looked, so he accepted Gimenez de Rodriguez's offer to perform a second rhinoplasty, but the operation only left him even more disfigured and in worse pain, and he eventually complained to the police and the state health department. An undercover investigator visited Gimenez de Rodriguez at her workplace in order to obtain evidence of her posing as a doctor. Police arrested the suspect when she was in the middle of performing a procedure on another patient, and she was booked into custody on charges of practicing medicine without a license and resisting without violence. The outcome of the case is unclear. Number 15. Matteo Poti. Italian-born Matteo Poti has an 8th grade education, but that didn't stop him from posing as a world-class plastic surgeon and operating on as many as 28 people under the alias Dr. Matthew Mode. He was first arrested for the sham in Italy in 2011, but he managed to avoid prison time. Poti fell under suspicion again in 2019 when he spent a year working at 4 different clinics in Bucharest. A keen-eyed colleague noticed that he couldn't even hold a syringe correctly and that he failed to practice proper hand washing and other habits that should be routine for any doctor. At least one patient experienced complications after being operated on by Poti, who was arrested as he attempted to flee the country on a train bound for Budapest. He denied posing as a doctor and claimed that he had a medical degree from Johns Hopkins University in Baltimore, Maryland. But the university confirmed that Poti did not attend its medical school. In 2023, Poti was sentenced to nearly 4 years in prison for fraud, but he managed to flee Romania, was captured in Italy, where he successfully fought against his extradition. According to the most recent available updates on the case, authorities were planning to have him serve his full sentence in an Italian prison. Number 14. Oscar Palano. Teresa de Jesus Batista Ramirez pleaded with her 28-year-old son, Manuel Nunez, not to travel to the Dominican Republic for liposuction. Nunez had already gotten liposuction twice, and he planned to return for a third time to Santo Domingo's Caribbean Plastic Surgery Clinic against his mother's urging. The young restaurant worker caught a flight out of New York City in June of 2019 with plans to return to the Big Apple after the procedure. Unfortunately, Nunez never made it back home because he went into respiratory failure on the operating table and died. His mother knew something was wrong when he was still unconscious 9 hours after his scheduled appointment time, but staff members at the clinic reportedly told her it was normal. Shortly after Nunez's death, his family discovered that the man who performed his liposuction, Dr. Oscar Palano, was a gynecologist, not a plastic surgeon. Just 4 years earlier, in 2015, Palano spent 3 months in jail on suspicion of involuntary manslaughter after 2 female patients died in his care within a 7-day span. The charges were ultimately dismissed due to a lack of evidence, but he was ordered to pay $450,000 to the victims' families, and the clinic he was running at the time was shut down by the authorities. In 2016, Palano was accused of causing another young woman's death. By the time Nunez died, he had been denounced by the Dominican Society of Plastic Surgery for falsely operating as a surgeon. It's unclear whether he's faced any disciplinary action since the manslaughter case was dropped. Number 13. Carlos Chacon. 36-year-old Megan Espinoza went into cardiac arrest while undergoing a breast augmentation at a clinic in Bonita, California. In December of 2018, she passed away a month later. Espinoza's surgeon, Dr. Carlos Chacon, was accused of using an improperly trained nurse to administer anesthesia, waiting more than 3 hours to dial 911 after Espinoza's medical emergency began, and refusing to let his employees call for help as she lay dying on the operating table. During that time, Chacon allegedly left the operating room to consult with 4 other patients and lied to Espinoza's husband about her condition. Chacon was initially charged with manslaughter, but the charge was upgraded to second-degree murder in 2023. In July of 2024, he pleaded guilty to a reduced involuntary manslaughter charge and 3 counts of aiding and abetting the practice of medicine without a license. As part of a plea agreement, he was sentenced to 3 years in prison and his medical license was permanently revoked. Authorities also charged nurse Heather Lang Vass, who pleaded guilty to involuntary manslaughter in exchange for a prison sentence of up to 4 years. Number 12. Thomas Dixon. Married plastic surgeon Thomas Dixon began cheating on his wife with Rochelle Shatina when she went to his medical spa in Amarillo, Texas, for Botox injections in 2008. His wife discovered the affair and filed for divorce, and Shatina left him just months later after realizing that it wasn't the type of relationship she was looking for. In 2011, Shatina began dating another doctor, Joseph Sonnier, who she met at a ballroom dancing class. At the time, Dixon was still trying to win her back even though years had passed since their breakup. Shatina made it clear that she had moved on and was happy with her new partner, but this did little, if anything, to deter Dixon from continuing to obsess over her. It was therefore no coincidence that Shatina often felt like someone was watching her and like someone was trying to interfere with her and Sonnier's relationship. The already alarming situation escalated into devastating violence. In July of 2012, when Sonnier was shot and stabbed to death by a home intruder. A few days after the murder, a tipster told police that his roommate, David Shepard, had killed a man in Lubbock, which is where Sonnier just happened to live. When confronted by investigators, Shepard confessed that Dixon had paid him 3 silver bars and a box of Cuban cigars in exchange for killing Sonnier. Shepard pleaded guilty to first-degree murder in order to avoid the death penalty, but Dixon maintained his innocence and placed his fate in the hands of a jury. In an unexpected twist, Shepard suddenly changed his story. While testifying on the witness stand during Dixon's trial, he claimed that Dixon had sent him to Sonnier's property to take photos and that he had acted alone in his decision to kill the victim. The trial ended in a hung jury. During the second trial, prosecutors did not call Shepard to the stand. Instead, they sought the testimony of his roommate, Paul Reynolds, and Shepard's daughter, Haley, who said she believed her dad was covering up for Dixon. The jury found Dixon guilty of 2 counts of capital murder, and he was sentenced to life without parole. In 2022, an appeals court tossed one of the 2 murder convictions, but upheld the other one, which failed to accomplish Dixon's goal of getting out of prison. Since then, he has continued to fight his case from behind bars. His most recent motion, filed in April of 2024, contains nearly 50 reasons for why he believes he's illegally imprisoned, including allegations of ineffective counsel, false statements from detectives, being denied his due process rights, and insufficient evidence to convict. Number 11. Dennis Dr. Bum Bum Furtado. Known to his hundreds of thousands of Instagram followers as Dr. Bum Bum or Dr. Backside, 45-year-old Dennis Cesar Barros Furtado's fame turned to infamy in July of 2018 when he was accused of killing a woman during a botched Brazilian butt lift at his home in Rio de Janeiro. The patient, 46-year-old mother of 2, Lilian Calixto, fell ill during the operation after traveling nearly 1,000 miles to Rio from her home in Cuabia. Furtado took her to the emergency room where she arrived conscious but quickly deteriorated and went into cardiac arrest. Doctors were unable to resuscitate Calixto, who they believe suffered a pulmonary embolism caused by an injection of acrylic glass filler known as PMMA. The death set off alarm bells among medical professionals, prompting the city's regional medical council to investigate. According to their findings, Furtado injected a dangerously high dose of PMMA, far exceeding the recommended maximum safe dose, in an improper place on the patient's rear end, which is all it takes for a butt lift to take a deadly turn. Authorities also accused him of performing the procedure with assistance from his mother, Maria de Fatima Furtado, his 19-year-old girlfriend, and a medical assistant who acted as a surgical technician but was not qualified to do so. Neither Furtado nor his mother had a license to practice in the state of Rio de Janeiro at the time of the incident. Following Calixto's death, police arrested Furtado's mother, girlfriend, and medical assistant. By then, Furtado had gone on the run despite declaring his innocence on social media. He was captured 4 days later on a warrant for murder and has since lost his medical license. As of January 2024, the case was still waiting to go to trial. Number 10. Karim Saain. In February of 2022, police in Nashville, Tennessee, responded to multiple calls about a peeping Tom looking into residents' homes through their windows. The callers' descriptions of the man were all similar, leading to the suspicion that one person was responsible for the recent spying incidents. Law enforcement arrested the suspect after security guards caught him outside a woman's home during what the victim said was the suspect's third unwelcome visit to her house that week. Identified by police as 36-year-old Karim Saain, he had tried to flee on foot after being spotted by the security guards, but they caught up with him and detained him until the cops arrived. The victim provided officers with surveillance footage of Saain, which, according to police, showed the suspect standing outside the woman's windows for extended periods of time on multiple occasions. He could also be seen pointing his cell phone toward the interior of the home. At the time of his arrest, Saain was listed on Vanderbilt University Medical Center's website as a plastic surgery resident. He was booked into custody on charges of stalking and unlawful photography. The case is ongoing, and he does not appear to be in custody at this time. Number 9. Robert Birnbaum. 29-year-old Gail Katz Birnbaum mysteriously vanished from New York City's Upper East Side in July of 1985. Her body was never found, but she was presumed dead, and the case was treated as a homicide. Suspicion soon fell on Gail's husband, plastic surgeon Robert Birnbaum. Robert told police that Gail had stormed out of their apartment in a rage during an argument, and that he assumed she had gone to Central Park to cool off. Several months into the investigation, police discovered that Robert, who had a pilot's license, had rented a plane and flown it over the Atlantic Ocean in the hours following Gail's disappearance, leading to suspicions that he had murdered his wife and pushed her body out of the aircraft. Even before the couple married, Gail's family had noticed that Robert was short-tempered and controlling. Her sister had even tried to talk her out of marrying Robert, but was unsuccessful. Robert denied any involvement in his wife's disappearance. At the time, there wasn't enough evidence to charge him with any crimes, so he remained free and carried on with his life as if Gail had never existed. By the time prosecutors decided to pursue a murder charge against Robert, he was married and raising a family in North Dakota. The case was entirely circumstantial, lacking both forensic evidence and eyewitness testimony. The jury nevertheless found Robert guilty of second-degree murder after deliberating for 5.5 hours, and he was sentenced to 20 years to life in prison. Robert clung stubbornly to his claims of innocence as he spent years fighting unsuccessfully to overturn his case. He finally confessed to Gail's murder during his first parole hearing in 2020. Just as police had suspected, he had killed Gail at home and then dumped her body out of an airplane while flying over the Atlantic. He told the parole board that he lost his temper and strangled his wife because he wanted her to stop yelling at him, noting that he was immature and didn't know how to handle his anger. More than 30 years after Gail's death, Robert finally took responsibility for his actions, although he didn't seem particularly remorseful. According to the slain woman's loved ones, he was denied parole twice so far and remains behind bars while awaiting his next hearing. Number 8. Jonathan Peter Brooks. Early one morning in January of 2021, a camouflage-clad intruder entered the home of 65-year-old plastic surgeon Graham Perks in Nottinghamshire, England, and doused the interior with gasoline. After awakening to the commotion, Perks went to see what was going on and came face to face with the suspect, who stabbed him and ran away. Perks was rushed to the emergency room where he was treated in the intensive care unit for stab wounds to the chest and stomach. Doctors were reportedly shocked that he survived, estimating that 95% of patients with similar injuries would have died. If his family hadn't called for help immediately, he would have likely lost his life. The suspect was identified as 55-year-old fellow plastic surgeon Jonathan Peter Brooks, who had previously worked under Perks at Nottingham University Hospital's NHS Trust. In a lawsuit he filed in 2016 seeking nearly $7 million in compensation, he accused the hospital of penalizing him for complaining about the working conditions. Instead of awarding Brooks any money, a panel concluded that he had unintentionally stretched the truth and ordered him to pay more than $230,000 in legal fees. It's unclear whether the failed lawsuit was a motivating factor in the stabbing, but Perks had acted as a witness in the hospital's disciplinary proceedings against Brooks, which began 3 days before the stabbing. After the attack, Brooks was charged with attempted murder, 3 counts of attempted arson with intent to endanger life, and possession of a knife in a public place. A trial began in 2022 but was called off due to the defendant's ailing health. The trial was adjourned in May of 2023 and again in April of 2024, and the case appears to be on hold. Number 7. Anthony Pinataro. With his red Lamborghini and flashy behavior, Anthony Pinataro stood in sharp contrast to the largely working-class population of Western New York, but his hotshot reputation was forever changed in 1997 when 26-year-old Sarah Smith went into cardiac arrest on his operating table while undergoing a breast augmentation. Smith died in the hospital a few days later. The medical examiner concluded that she had stopped breathing due to improper ventilation and a dangerously high dose of medication she received from Pinataro. The authorities arrested Pinataro, and numerous other women came forward with disturbing stories of botched operations. In 1998, Pinataro pleaded guilty to criminally negligent homicide in exchange for several other charges being dropped. He was sentenced to 6 months behind bars plus 5 years of probation and was permanently banned from practicing medicine just months after his release. Pinataro was charged with attempted murder for poisoning his wife with arsenic in an apparent attempt to kill her for life insurance money. He pleaded guilty to a reduced charge of attempted assault and was sentenced to 15 years in prison. Following his release in 2013, he moved to Palm Beach, Florida, and changed his name to Anthony Hort. In 2019, journalists from WKBW's I-Team discovered that Pinataro was advertising his services on an elder care website. He quickly deleted the listing after being confronted by reporters, but authorities determined that he wasn't breaking the law by working in a care position as long as he wasn't advertising himself or acting as a doctor. Speaking with the Oxygen Channel show License to Kill, Erie County, New York District Attorney John Flynn described the former surgeon as one of the most dangerous criminals he's ever dealt with in his career. It's unclear what Pinataro is up to these days, and his LinkedIn profile lists his employer as private. Number 6. Peter Norman. 33-year-old Ralph Gonzalez died in December of 2006 after receiving an overdose of lidocaine during a liposuction procedure at Dr. Peter Norman's clinic in Maricopa County, Arizona. Upon arriving at the scene, emergency responders quickly discovered that Norman had improperly inserted an airway tube, which hastened his death. 4 months later, in April of 2007, 41-year-old Alicia Santizo Blanco suffered a fatal pulmonary embolism on Norman's operating table after fat was accidentally injected into a vein during a butt lift. Other patients who were lucky enough to survive their botched procedures would later describe waking up from surgery and instantly knowing that something was very wrong. After Santizo's death, the Arizona Medical Board and Norman's license was temporarily restricted while an investigation was carried out. He wasn't supposed to have any patients in his care during that time, but just 3 months later, 53-year-old Leslie Ann Ray died following a liposuction procedure at Norman's clinic. The botched operation was allegedly carried out by Dr. Gary Page, who wasn't qualified to perform plastic surgery, and authorities shut Norman's clinic down. Norman's license was revoked, and he was charged with 2 counts of second-degree murder for the deaths of Gonzalez and Santizo, along with 1 count of manslaughter in connection with Ray's case. He fled the country after posting bail but was apprehended at a Kentucky airport in October of 2008. In 2011, Norman was found guilty on all counts and sentenced to 25 years in prison, but he appealed his case and got his conviction overturned. In accordance with the judge's order, prosecutors retried each of the 3 cases separately. Norman was found guilty of murder for Gonzalez's death, and he pleaded guilty to the murder and manslaughter charges in the cases of Santizo and Ray, resulting in consecutive sentences adding up to 25 years. Number 5. Matthew Bonano. In August of 2019, police in Tuckahoe, New York, were contacted by a concerned friend of 47-year-old plastic surgeon Matthew Bonano, who claimed that Bonano expressed a desire to kill his ex-wife and daughter while the 2 men were out drinking at a bar. Investigators found Bonano's car outside his ex-wife's house with a cache of weapons and gear inside. Between the items that were found inside the vehicle in Bonano's apartment and at his parents' house, police seized at least 5 fully loaded illegal assault rifles with high-capacity magazines, 3 unregistered handguns, dozens of loaded magazines, 1,600 rounds of ammunition, a stun gun, smoke grenades, ballistic armor, knives, and more. Authorities charged Bonano with 53 crimes consisting mainly of gun-related counts. He was not charged with threatening his family, but Tuckahoe Police Chief John Costanzo praised the friend who reported their concerns as a hero for coming forward and possibly thwarting the tragedy. Bonano denied the allegation, and his ex-wife even went to court to advocate for his release from jail amid his pending case. During the hearing, she said that Bonano never posed a threat to her, even though one of the prosecutors on the case claimed that Bonano had previously threatened to snap his ex's neck and talked about how easy it would be to dispose of her body. The case dragged its heels through the court system for 2 years before Bonano pleaded guilty to a reduced charge of attempted second-degree criminal possession of a weapon in 2021. He was upset because a felony conviction meant that he would lose his license to practice medicine, but he was spared from prison time with a 5-year probation sentence, which was a lot less than the amount of time he could have faced if he'd been convicted as charged. Number 4. Florida's deadly bargain clinics. Starting in the 2000s, patients from all over the US flocked to bargain plastic surgery clinics in South Florida where butt lifts, tummy tucks, and other cosmetic procedures were advertised at cut-rate prices. But these cheap operations came at a deadly cost, with at least 13 patient deaths occurring at 4 clinics between 2008 and 2018. Several patients died from fat embolisms, while others succumbed to deadly doses and combinations of opioids and sedatives. At least a dozen others suffered critical injuries from botched procedures. In 2019, USA Today published an expose on the 4 clinics: New Life Plastic Surgery, Strax Rejuvenation, Seduction by Jardon, and Spectrum Aesthetics. All 4 businesses were owned by convicted felons, including one clinic whose operators had been previously convicted of defrauding Medicare out of $1 million. Jeffrey Davis, who co-owns Strax Rejuvenation, was convicted of bank fraud and tax evasion during the mid-1990s. Due to a loophole in Florida's laws, it's perfectly legal for people without medical degrees, including felons, to own and run medical clinics with little to no accountability for things that go wrong. Between 2013 and 2019, state lawmakers proposed 4 bills that would close the loophole and tighten the standards of operation for these facilities, but all 4 proposals were shot down. Since then, dozens of more deaths have occurred at plastic surgery clinics throughout the Miami area. All of the clinics in the USA Today investigation appear to still be operated, including a facility whose parent company declared bankruptcy after being inundated with lawsuits. In May of 2024, Florida Governor Rick DeSantis signed a bill into law to better protect plastic surgery consumers. Known as HB 1561, the legislation imposed stricter safety standards on doctors who perform Brazilian butt lifts and liposuction, including a requirement to register their business with the Department of Health. The law also increased fines for non-compliance and the amount of insurance coverage that both doctors and plastic surgery centers are required to carry. Whether the new legal changes will lead to a reduction in botched surgeries and plastic surgery-related deaths remains to be seen. Number 3. Grant Robichaud. 43-year-old Grant Robichaud of Newport Beach, California, gained fame as a reality TV star, but he was also a well-respected hand surgeon. His reputation was tested in 2018 when 13 women accused him of drugging and assaulting them. Robichaud was charged with 16 crimes in connection with 7 victims. His girlfriend, 36-year-old Sarissa Riley, was also charged based on allegations that she helped Robichaud lure women with the intent of assaulting them. The charges against Riley were eventually dropped, and the charges against Robichaud were gradually reduced as the case languished in court for more than 5 years. By late 2023, all of the assault-related charges against Robichaud had been dismissed, and the remaining charges were connected to only one victim. He pleaded guilty to a felony gun possession charge and a misdemeanor drug count. The judge sentenced him to 2 years of probation with the possibility of having the gun conviction reduced to a misdemeanor and eventually expunged. Robichaud was also ordered to perform 32 hours of community service and attend 16 hours of drug education classes. Following the sentencing hearing, the disgraced former surgeon's defense attorney, Philip Cohen, told reporters that Robichaud's professional life and reputation are done, even though most of the charges were dropped. Cohen went on to explain that his client could get his medical license back if his charges are expunged, but that he doubts anyone would be willing to hire him due to the allegations detailed in the news coverage of the case. Robichaud and Riley are reportedly broke and living in an RV park as he considers his options for fighting to legally clear his name. Today's topic was requested by Stuart 1953, RW 2382, and Temitopio Mamegbe 8019. If you have any other topics you'd like to learn about, subscribe and let us know in the comments section below. Number 2. Jan Adams. Harvard and UCLA educated plastic surgeon Jan Adams began his career authoring studies that were featured in scientific journals along with a book about his craft. He rose to fame as a correspondent on news and talk shows and has appeared as a guest on the Oprah Winfrey Show and Plastic Surgery before and after. Adams' name first landed in the news for bad reasons in 2007 when rapper Kanye West's mother, Donda West, died the day after undergoing a breast reduction surgery. The medical examiner who performed her autopsy ruled that her death was caused by a combination of coronary artery disease, and factors related to her post-operative care. Following Donda's death, it was revealed that Adams had been ordered to pay nearly $500,000 to settle 2 malpractice lawsuits in 2001. The negative press that he received after the tragedy nearly destroyed his practice, and he didn't help matters by walking off the Larry King live show when he was questioned about Donda's death. A few months later, he reappeared on the show expressing a desire to defend himself and took responsibility for multiple past drunk driving offenses. In June of 2008, Adams was arrested on another drunk driving charge after his car was spotted traveling in the wrong direction on a freeway at 2:40 in the morning. He was also charged with driving with a license that was suspended over a previous DUI conviction. In early 2009, he was sentenced to a year in jail. Adams surrendered his medical license a few months later, but successfully fought to get it reinstated in 2013. The California Medical Board agreed to reinstate Adams under probationary conditions, and he lost his medical license the following year for failing to follow the terms of his probation. For several years, Kanye West harbored a lot of anger toward Adams for his mother's death. The situation calmed down in 2018 when West responded positively to a letter that Adams had sent him in an attempt to make peace and to dispel some apparent misunderstandings that led to West blaming him for the tragedy. Adams has remained largely out of the news in recent years, indicating that he's living his life quietly following his downfall. If you thought these plastic surgeons weren't awful enough, wait until you see just how bad people can get after number 1. We have When Former Soldiers Go Wrong ready for you, so stay tuned. Number 1. Theodore GLE. In January of 2018, staff members at a hospital in Lexington, Kentucky, alerted officials to their suspicion that a plastic surgeon had shown up drunk to perform an operation. Dr. Theodore GLE had just arrived ahead of the surgery on a Monday afternoon when the chief medical officer on duty confronted him about his seemingly inebriated state. GLE left the hospital on foot in his scrubs with no jacket on despite the below freezing temperatures outside. Police arrested him just a few blocks away and booked him into custody on a public intoxication charge. While it's unclear how the situation played out, records show that GLE has continued to practice medicine in recent years and that he's been disciplined at least twice by the Kentucky Board of Medical Licensure. His most recent order came in 2022, when the agency placed his license on a 5-year probation period after investigating a complaint from a patient about his performance on a medical procedure. During that time, he's required to adhere to certain conditions set forth by the medical board and could be subject to an immediate suspension of his license if he violates the terms of his probation. Number 7. Colin Reeves. On November the 21st of 2021, a former commando killed his neighbors in the village of Norton, Fitzwarren, Somerset, England, following what was reported as a long-running dispute over parking. Chilling footage later released by the authorities would show 35-year-old Colin Reeves jumping over the fence and onto the property of Jennifer and Stephen Chappell, both in their 30s. As the couple's children slept upstairs, he fatally stabbed each of them 6 times with a ceremonial dagger that had been given to him upon leaving the army. Minutes later, Reeves called the police to report the crime, telling a dispatcher, "I went round with a knife. I've stabbed both of them." 10 days before the double homicide, the former soldier had berated Jennifer outside her home following an earlier exchange that she'd had with his wife, Kaylee, about designated parking in the area. After he was taken into custody and during the ensuing trial, Reeves admitted manslaughter but denied murder on the ground of diminished responsibility, maintaining he was not in the right state of mind at the time of the attack. Prior to leaving the army in 2017, Reeves had toured Afghanistan with the Royal Engineers and lost friends in the conflict. Reeves added that he didn't have time to decompress following his tour and insisted that he didn't remember the attack on the Chappells. He told the court he'd been trained to kill and that his instincts were triggered by a bright white flash from a security light on the day. He remembered feeling that he had to protect his family from impending danger. While in prison, he was assessed by a forensic psychologist who determined he suffered from depression, anxiety, and complex post-traumatic stress disorder. Reeves was nevertheless found guilty of murder and sentenced to life in prison with a minimum of 38 years served. in June of 2022. Number 6. Tyler Griffiths. After leaving the army, following a service of 4 years, British man Tyler Griffiths developed a serious drug problem and amassed considerable debts in the process. The 22-year-old eventually turned to crime to cover what he owed. On February the 10th of 2019, he wore a balaclava on his face and walked into a mini-market in Halifax, West Yorkshire, armed with a kitchen knife. CCTV captured him instructing a female shop assistant who was working alone to surrender money from a cash drawer after he'd unsuccessfully tried to pry it open. He told the woman, "Don't call the police or I will kill you," before making off with over $800. Griffiths had neglected to cover his hands, which featured distinctive tattoos, during the robbery. CCTV photos of him handling the cash were distributed by the authorities and he was soon identified. He was arrested in March and subsequently pleaded guilty to armed robbery, for which he was jailed for 3 years in May. In addition to the robbery, Griffiths also admitted 4 shoplifting offenses: common assault, burglary, possession of cocaine, and possession of a knife. A week after the Halifax robbery and before tips led to the police learning his name, he'd grabbed close to $130 from an unattended cash drawer at a Harrogate shop. While making his escape, he pushed the 75-year-old shop owner into shelving. His lawyer told the court that Griffiths regretted to have squandered his good character and his opportunities in life, and pointed to the drugs as the root cause of his offending. Number 5. Thomas Mixon. On February the 26th of 2018, a former Navy SEAL was arrested by law enforcement in Austin, Texas, in connection to 5 bank robberies in the area, carried out since December of the previous year. During his 8-year service, Thomas Mixon instructed a Navy SEAL conditioning course. In 2007, Austin Fit magazine included him on a list of the city's 10 fittest. Investigators believe that the former soldier's criminal activity began on December the 22nd of 2017, when he robbed the IBC Bank in West Austin. He fled in a dark gray pickup truck and hit the same bank again on January the 5th. The 3rd and 4th robberies happened at the Prosperity Bank on Northland Drive west of Mopac Expressway on February the 1st and the 7th. Witnesses' description of the suspect matched that of the person involved in the previous 2 incidents, while CCTV footage from 2 robberies indicated they'd been committed by the same perpetrator. The last heist took place on the same day that Mixon was arrested, after a witness provided law enforcement with his license plate number. Shortly after he'd fled from Plains Capital Bank on North Mopac, near Palmer Lane, the police took him into custody at his home in northwest Austin. While he was walking towards his truck, inside the vehicle they found the black leather satchel that multiple witnesses had spotted on him, and inside his home they found plastic bags identical to the one used in the first robbery. On April the 17th of 2019, Mixon pleaded guilty to 5 federal counts of bank robbery and was sentenced to 97 months in prison, with an additional 5 years of supervised release. Number 4. Joseph Manuel Hunter. From 1983 to 2004, Joseph Manuel Hunter served in the U.S. Army, where he led air assault and airborne infantry squads, became a master drill sergeant and a sniper instructor. Hunter left the service as a sergeant first class, prolific in a vast variety of weapons and operational procedures. The man, nicknamed Rambo, subsequently began recruiting former soldiers from international armed forces. He put together an elite team of mercenaries in the early 2010s to serve as bodyguards and assassins for a Colombian cartel. The mercenaries team's activities spanned the globe, from guarding a meeting in Mauritius to securing a ship in the Bahamas that was loaded with close to 700 pounds of cocaine and destined for New York. For his Colombian contacts, Hunter orchestrated a plot to kill a drug enforcement agent and an informant within the cartel. 2 of his accomplices, former German corporal and elite sniper Dennis Gogol and former U.S. Army Sergeant Timothy Van Vakias, agreed to kill the agent in exchange for $700,000. Unbeknownst to Hunter, his cartel employers were confidential sources to the DEA, who were recording their communication. Hunter was sentenced to 20 years in prison for the assassination plot and other crimes related to the Colombian connection. Gogol and Van Macias were also arrested and charged, as were two other members of Hunter's team, former Polish counter-terrorism expert Sławomir Zaborowski and former German military sniper Michael Filter. Hunter was given an additional sentence of life in a federal prison in 2019 for a previous contract killing. In 2012, it paid assassins Adam Samir and Carl David Stilwell, both of North Carolina, $35,000 each to kill a woman in the Philippines. He provided them with weapons and information about the unnamed target. Samir and Stilwell executed her on February the 12th of 2012 and then dumped her body on a garbage pile, where it was found by local authorities. After receiving payment, they structured discreet wire transfers back to the US. Both were arrested in July of 2015 and, like Hunter, later sentenced to life in prison. Number 3. Craig Woodhall. British health worker Victoria Woodhall was brutally stabbed to death outside her home in Middlecliff, a small hamlet of South Yorkshire, England, on March the 29th of 2020. The woman's husband, former soldier Craig, had a history of controlling and abusive behavior towards her. She'd at one point confided in a friend that he'd thrown her phone and pushed her. After the couple had become estranged, Craig sought reconciliation, but the effort was reportedly interrupted by more hostility, including one incident in which he'd tried to get Victoria arrested over allegedly breaking coronavirus lockdown rules. On March the 29th, the woman's neighbors alerted the authorities that Craig was chasing her around her property. Before law enforcement reached the scene, the former soldier slashed and stabbed the woman with a kukri machete in a gruesome attack that was witnessed by several people. Victoria sustained injuries to the head, neck, and upper body, which proved fatal. Woodhall fled the scene in his car but was later arrested. The 41-year-old admitted murder and in early October of 2020 was jailed for 18 years and 6 months. Number 2. Benjamin Sifrit. In 1997, Benjamin Sifrit completed the basic underwater demolition SEAL training class 212, but later had his Navy enlisted classification combatant swimmer revoked. He was discharged for poor performance, insubordination, and repeatedly being absent without leave. He also harbored extremist beliefs and had a white supremacist symbol tattooed on his chest. In 1998, he married Erica Elaine Grace when they were both 20 years old and moved near her hometown in Altoona, Pennsylvania. During Memorial Day weekend in 2002, they met another couple, Joshua Ford and Martha Crutchley, who were visiting from Virginia. After partying together at a nightclub in Ocean City, Maryland, the four went back to the Sifrits' condominium. While there, they accused the tourists of stealing Erica's purse and threatened them with a gun. Ford fled to the bathroom where he was fatally shot 4 times with a gun, subsequently determined to have been Erica's. Crutchley was murdered as well, but her cause of death remained unclear, with stabbing as the leading hypothesis. The Sifrits cut up the couple and then threw their remains in a dumpster in Rehoboth Beach, Delaware, from where they were moved to a landfill and later found by searchers. A few days after the double murder, the Sifrits were caught trying to burglarize a Hooters restaurant, at which point law enforcement found driver's licenses belonging to Ford and Crutchley in Erica's possession. She would tell law enforcement that her former soldier husband had come up with the idea to rob and kill the tourists. During Benjamin's 2003 trial, a woman named Melissa Selling told the court that the Sifrits had put her through the same ritual as they had the slain tourists, but she'd managed to avoid being killed by them. Benjamin was only found guilty of second-degree murder for Crutchley's death and given a sentence of 38 years in prison. Erica was found guilty of Ford's first-degree murder and Crutchley's second-degree murder, for which she was sentenced to life plus 20 years. Number 1. Eddie Ray Routh. During his service as a U.S. Navy SEAL sniper, Chris Kyle served 4 tours in the Iraq War and was awarded numerous commendations for acts of heroism, including the Silver Star. He had over 150 confirmed kills throughout his service, becoming the most prolific sniper in the history of the U.S. military. After being honorably discharged in 2009, he published his best-selling autobiography, American Sniper, which was later made into an eponymous movie. Kyle also dedicated his time towards working with veterans. On February the 2nd of 2013, he and his friend, 35-year-old Chad Littlefield, went to a shooting range in Erath County, Texas. They'd taken 25-year-old Eddie Ray Routh, a U.S. Marine Corps veteran, with them, hoping the trip would help with his post-traumatic stress disorder. He'd served for 7 years, including in Baghdad, and had been honorably discharged in 2011. Routh was in and out of hospitals for the following 2 years, experiencing PTSD from his time in the military, as well as auditory hallucinations and paranoia, which clinicians determined were connected to drugs and alcohol abuse. He was offered inpatient treatment at a veterans hospital, but declined and stopped taking his medication. As they were heading to the shooting range, Kyle texted Littlefield, "This dude is straight up nuts," referring to Routh, to which Littlefield replied by asking the former sniper to watch his back. Upon reaching their destination, the two went down range to set up targets. Moments later, Routh opened fire on them, using 2 handguns owned by Kyle. The latter and Littlefield had pistols on them, but they were holstered and with the safety on. They didn't have time to react and was shot dead. Routh was caught by Texas authorities after engaging them on a short freeways chase while driving Kyle's Ford F-350 truck. He was held on 2 counts of capital murder. A few months after the incident, while in jail, he told the deputy that he'd shot the 2 men because they hadn't talked to him, adding, "I'm sure they've forgiven me." During Routh's trial, his defense argued he'd been insane at the time of the killings, but 2 forensic psychologists testified to say they believe he was faking schizophrenia. One of them opined that he suffered from paranoid personality disorder exacerbated by drugs and alcohol. He was eventually found guilty of murder and sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. Thanks for watching. Would you rather get operated on by Conrad Murray, or hypothetically, when he was still alive, send your children to a sleepover at Michael Jackson's house? Let us know in the comments section below.